I think the traps in the Home Alone series are cool, but a lot of the enjoyment really involves suspending my disbelief. The least believable part being, of course, that Kevin McAllister's suburban home is not safe unless it's completely rigged from top to bottom. But despite how ridiculously it all plays out, the Home Alone contraptions have earned quite a name in the chain reaction community somehow, as lots of friends and relatives I talk to will say things like, "Oh, chain reactions, like those contraptions from Home Alone?" And I think now is a good time to talk about these, especially with the new Disney special coming out, because to me, these contraptions don't fall quite on the spectrum of what I'd consider to be chain reactions. Or maybe they do, but like on a very low tier. And to show that, I'm going to do to the Home Alone traps what I do to every famous chain reaction. I'm going to remake them, myself, in my own home. First, let's really quickly address why these aren't quite chain reactions. It's not just because they're short and don't have a lot of steps in sequence, because even then you can just call them 2 or 3 step chain reactions. The defining element for me is the human element. The people breaking in are constantly interacting with these contraptions to keep them functioning. The tall guy slips on some slime stuff, slides across the floor, and crashes into a shelf which falls on top of him. The contraption here is the slime on the floor leading up to the shelf, and the shelf propped up on one leg. Nothing would even move, not the slime, not the shelf, without the person being the critical connection. And then it doesn't even need to be set up like a chain reaction when the driving factor of the contraption is a human, and they will just do exactly what the contraption wants them to do. All the while, the audience suspends their disbelief and treats this human-powered sequence of events like a chain reaction. But thankfully, there are still some contraptions we can remake in a chain reaction sort of way without too much human interaction, though they do seem to exemplify chain reaction concepts rather than full-on build techniques. Like this one I saw in the third movie, which uses a tape measure release into a sliding drawer, which is hard to see because of how it's filmed, but you can bet that that tape measure is extended to some degree in front of the drawer and is holding it back, like I'm demonstrating here. A tape measure can be used for holding back quite a lot of heavy objects, and it's kind of hard to explain why, but basically it seems to absorb a lot of the force while trying to retract itself back in the same way a clothespin can absorb a lot of force while trying to clamp down. There's also this one, where Kevin suspends a bag of tools above the door, which drops the tools on the dude walking through. The force of the door opening the zipper is completely dependent on how hard the person opens the door, so yes, the way this contraption is built in the movie is completely reliant on human power. It looks like the tools fall out of a duffel bag, but I think it's a better idea to use a rigid container like a box so it won't sag and trap whatever is inside, and it's probably even better to hold it closed with a latch instead of a zipper so that nobody needs to constantly be pushing the door for the box to open all the way. It will just open all at once when the door reaches a certain point, and that actually takes away the human element somewhat. Naturally, a lot of these traps start with motions that are part of being in a house, like walking through a doorway or turning on a light, and then go into the more out-of-place objects in the contraption, like the fan that blows feathers, which is set off with a tripwire. It's so hard to see the connection from the angle that is filmed, so I'll just make my own, and I don't own a prop fan that's as powerful as the one in the movie, but you get the point. Another recurring one from the movies is a string tied to a heavy object, like an iron, which causes the object to fall when the string is pulled. That one is pretty self-explanatory, and I shouldn't need to demonstrate it in its entirety. And then let's talk about the swinging bucket, used in both the first and second films. Easy enough when you can find a banister or something to tie the bucket around, though I'm just going to stay in my build room and tape it to the ceiling. Something that's interesting is that when the weight at the end of the string gets too heavy, it can cause the string to bounce once it gets taut. So the fact that the bucket swings so smoothly here means it's probably just a manufactured shot. If I had my target here, and I released the weight from the same relative point where Kevin releases it, it would bounce over the target. All I can really think about to fix this is have a rigid connection instead of a string and make the swing action more like a pendulum. But that's about it for the physics of these contraptions. A couple other ones include the overheated doorknob and the electrocuting sink, but it looks like those have more than just basic physics at play. So this is what I mean when I say remaking these is surprisingly easy. There's very little chain reaction application that goes into building these. Sometimes it's even just throw a brick, or put toy cars on the floor, or set up a seesaw outside a window, and have human antics do the rest for you. So I'm going to end with something I've done in every analysis video, and that is, make a claim about chain reaction art according to me. I believe that a lot of these artificial human-generated steps don't count as chain reactions. Human interaction shows up in a lot of movie chain reactions, and there are quite a few other examples of them, but in my opinion, let's not make these contraptions a good example of chain reaction achievement just because of how iconic they are.